everyone. Today we want to take a look at Matthew chapter 2, but what we're listening for is what the Spirit says to the congregations or to the witnesses. The Spirit is the one who's speaking through the Word, so that's what we want to come out. Chapter 2. When Yeshua was born in Beit Lechem, in the land of Yehudah, in the days of King Herod, behold, kings of the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is the king of the Yehudim who was born? For we saw his star in the east, so we came with gifts to bow down before him. Our footnotes: bow down before his face often means worship. And it happened, when Herod heard their words, that he stood terrified, and all the men of Jerusalem with him. So he gathered all the chiefs of the priests and the wise men. Terrified could be he was dismayed. The people. And he inquired of them whether they knew in what place Mashiach would be born. So they answered him, In Beit Lechem, Yehudah, for it is written according to the prophet, And you, Beit Lechem Ephrathah, behold, you are small among the thousands of Yehudah, yet from you one will go out for me, to be ruler in Yisrael. Then King Herod called the kings in secret, and he asked them in great diligence the time that the star appeared to them. Then he sent them to Beit Lechem, and said unto them, Go, inquire about the son with understanding and knowledge, and when you find him, return to me, so that I can go to bow myself down before him. So when they heard the words of the king, they went their way, and the star which they saw in the east was going before them, until it stood over or by the place where the sun was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with great joy. So they entered into the house, and found the son with Miriam his mother, and they bowed down before him. Then they opened their treasures, and gave him gold and frankincense and myrrh. But the messenger warned them that they should not return to Herod. So they returned to their kingdom by another way. And after their return, the messenger of Yud-Heh-Waw-Heh appeared unto Joseph in a dream, and said unto him, Arise, and take the son and his mother, and flee to Mitzrayim, and dwell there until I come unto you. For it is imminent that Herod will want the son to afflict him, or will want to afflict the son. Then he arose and took the son and his mother in the night, and went to Mitzrayim. And he stayed there until the death of Herod, to fulfill the words of El, which he spoke by the prophet, I called my son from Mitzrayim. And it happened, when Herod saw that the three kings made a mockery of him, he was exceedingly angry. So he commanded to put to death all the sons who were found in Beit Lechem and all its surroundings, from the time that the son was born, according to the time that he asked of the kings. Then was fulfilled which was spoken by Yirmiyahu the prophet. Loud voices of weeping and yelling was heard in Ramah, Rachel weeping over her sons, and she did not at all take comfort, for they do not exist. Any more being added for clarity. And when Herod died, the messenger of Yud-Heh-Waw-Heh appeared to him in a dream unto Joseph in Mitzrayim. And he said to him, Arise, and take the son and his mother, and go to the land of Yisrael. For he is dead who wanted to put the son to death. So he arose and took the son with his mother, and returned to the land of Yisrael. And it happened, when he heard that Archelaus was reigning instead of Herod his father in the land of Yehudah, he feared to go there, and he was warned in a dream to go to the land of Galilee. So he sojourned in the district of Netzaret, which was to fulfill the prophecy which said, He will call him a Nitzori. So district could mean town. Was there anything that stood out to you? What stood out to me was he is dead who wanted to put the son to death. So this is reminding me of he who kills by the sword must be slain by the sword. So whatever they wanted to do to Messiah, since they were a false witness, Torah says that this is what needs to happen to them. And Herod here is going to be a picture of the beast. So it's believed when the book of Daniel is fulfilled by Yahushua, that Herod's kind of acting as this antichrist figure. So we know that this is all going to happen again. But if anybody was like the serpent kind of attacking the heel, then this would probably point to Herod. Something else about the Antichrist is he thinks to change times and seasons. So this points us to this monk who set up the modern calendar. So 6th century, is it the 500s? They invent this calendar. So this is not the date in the time of Yahushua. I lean towards that Yahushua came at 5,500 is it AM since creation, since Adam started aging. That would be when he came, so that would be the 6th day of creation in the middle when Adam was created. So except now it's 5,500, pointing it back that each of these 1,000 years is like a day. So here is where the second Adam comes. And so there's like a lot to get into there, like 500 something. When they started writing in the year of our Lord, that was years since Messiah. But since it could have been 5,500, they're starting with 500, some of them. So 590 could have just been 90, depending on like when Yehoshua came. It could have been 550 or just before 5,500, etc. So when they're saying in the year of the Lord, they're not writing 5,500, they're writing just the 500 part. And then that gets put into this being the 6th century, but that could have just been just decades after Yahushua. Just my theory here. And it could even mean that he only came 500 years ago, and all of this history was invented to cover up what Yahushua did. It was all rewritten, so all these 1,000 years added, plus this 500 years. Crazy to think about. It would take a while to explain that theory. But yeah, so like this isn't even accurate is what he's pointing out here. Here's some things that we know from historians about Herod the Great. He founded the Herodian dynasty, technically Jewish by birth, since his family was from the Idumeans or the Edomites, that would be like Esau, who had been forcibly converted to Judaism under the Hasmonean Maccabees in the 2nd century BCE. Neither his religious behavior nor his ethics reflected anything of Judaism. He did, however, reconstruct and enlarge the Second Temple, which had been built under Zerubbabel. The Talmudic rabbis said, "One who has not seen Herod's temple has never seen a beautiful building." But also, it was built by a sinful king, and the building was intended by him as an atonement for having slain Israel's sages. I think, like around the final chapter of Daniel, right? Doesn't it say, probably pertaining to Antichrist character, that he would give gifts to people? I know, like, of Messiah, it says that he's ascended on high and he's given gifts to people, but something to do with the Antichrist, that he also gives out gifts. Herod was consistently paranoid about his power. He had all his rivals exterminated, including those of his wife's family. He had married Mariamne, a Hasmonean, and feared the restoration of the Hasmonean dynasty. And even some of his own children of the 15. He built remote fortresses, Herodion and Malzada, as refuges should he be deposed. And then it goes on to say the Magi are tied in with the Medo-Persian Empire or Babylon, talking of seeing his star in the east. Should we use the term Judeans or Jews? So he's saying that Jews is usually used by outsiders to distinguish Jews from Gentiles, but within they'd say from Judeans to distinguish them from the Galileans, who were kind of more from the northern empire. So to be a Judean or a Jew, it should be that you serve under the king of the Jews from that southern empire. So that did include another tribe and a half. So it doesn't mean necessarily that you're from the tribe of Judah. It just means that you serve that king, that you're from that southern kingdom. And his star, saying, it could point us back to there shall come forth a star out of Yaakov. So seeing his star should be a representation of him. I'm not sure if some people think it is Jupiter. There's some kind of really good video out on it. So he's not like Lucifer, the morning star, or it might have said the son of the morning for Lucifer, but he is the star that comes out of Yaakov. So the sign on the cross said, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. So Messiah, son of David was like a term for Messiah. King of the Jews, obviously. So also that they knew that he was supposed to come from Nazareth. This was something unanimously agreed between the priests, who this commentator says was primarily from the Sadducees, and from the scribes, who might have been more connected with the Pharisees. So here is the Midrash Rabbah on Limitations 116. A man was plowing when one of his oxen lowed. An Arab passed by and asked, "What are you?" He replied, "I am a Jew." The Arab said to him, "Unharness your ox and untie your plow," as a sign of mourning. "Why?" "Because the temple of the Jews is destroyed." The Jew asked, "How do you know this?" "From the lowing of your ox." While they were talking, the ox lowed again. The Arab said, "Harness your ox and tie up your plow, because the deliverer of the Jews is born." "What is his name?" "His name is Menachem," meaning comforter. "What is his father's name?" Chitziyahu. King Hezekiah is identified in Jewish literature with the Messiah. "Where do they live?" He answered, "In Briat Arba, in Beit Lechem of Judea." The same Agadah story appears in the Yerushalayim Talmud in Barachot 5a. There, the last line is, in the royal capital of Beit Lechem. Moreover, although it does not identify the Messiah as Yeshua, it implies that the Messiah has come already around the time of the temple's destruction. So the temple is destroyed, you need to mourn. Oh, but Messiah also comes around this time, so re-hook up your ox. Torah is understood to have 70 faces, meaning it's perfectly fine from a Jewish perspective to have multiple opinions, multiple things that you can take out of a single passage, where perhaps in the Christian environment we might feel uneasy. We think that it only can have one interpretation, and these can't be almost contradicting of each other. So there's the literal, plain sense of the meaning, and that is Peshat. And that's what this channel is named after, Pardes, an acronym for this. And so a lot of pastors, they do kind of get carried away and they do have all these other things. But it's important that you understand the plain meaning of the text, that these stories actually happened, and how it meant for somebody in that day, what the author's conveying. And the reason why this commentator is bringing it up is, out of Egypt I called my son. So this was literally fulfilled, we understand, in the physical with Israel when they left Egypt. So how can we say this about Messiah? So there also are these other levels of interpretation that Jews use. There's remiz, which is a hint, the meaning of this word remiz, wherein a word, phrase, or other element in the text hints at a truth not conveyed by the Peshat. The implied presumption is that God can hint at things of which the Bible writers themselves were even unaware. A drash or midrash, so we just did a quote from a midrash. This is going to go a little bit deeper, is search, an allegorical or homiletical application of a text. This is a species of exegesis, reading one's own thoughts into the text, as opposed to exegesis, which is extracting from the text what it actually says. It's like a teaching. A drash could be a teaching. The implied presumption is that the words of Scripture can legitimately become grist for the meal of human intellect, which God can guide to truths not directly related to the text at all. So I think that not everything has to date back to Moses, that each of us kind of contribute a little bit to Torah, and that's where we get that delight, that basking in that light of God, where we can contribute from our own perspective, our own experiences, not contradicting the plain meaning. So you have to understand the plain meaning first. So we're not going to go just completely crazy with it and do something that it does not say, but we're expounding on it and applying it to today. So each generation is going to be a little bit different and need to be explained, applicable to that generation or applicable to yourself. And so sod means secret. It's a mystical or hidden meaning arrived at by operating on the numerical values of the Hebrew letters, that's gematria, not noting unusual spellings, just an alteration of a letter, maybe it's written a little bit bigger, transposing letters, and the like. For example, two words, the numerical equivalents of whose letters add up to the same amount, are good candidates for revealing a secret through what author Kostlicher, in his book on the inventive mind called Bioclelion of Ideas, the implied presumption is that God invests meaning in the minutest details of Scripture, even the individual letters. So this together makes the word pardes. And that acronym forms another word that means orchard or garden. So literally, almost all of Tanakh is talking about historical events. So we need to understand these stories, how they unfold, understand the physical application of Torah. But really, all of the Old Testament, the Tanakh, is Messiah concealed. And all of the New Testament is like Messiah revealed. It's the same thing, except the New Testament would be like the foundation, or the one that's casting the shadow, or the tree, and then the Old Testament is like the roots. So they're one and the same, but Messiah is like the sod, the hidden, the foundation, also like a teaching that can be gleaned from it. So this is totally in line with Jewish understanding. For example, I think he's saying that this comes from the Zohar, which is the sod meaning, Kabbalah, the appropriate one that is on Torah, that 18th century Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav's story of the viceroy and the king's daughter, adding that most interpreters understand the viceroy to represent both Israel and the suffering Messiah. So it's kind of just like Messiah also is his church, Messiah is Israel. So in a way, it's like literally all the same. And here is another example, another quotation from Jeremiah. So the Peshat, the plain meaning, from Jeremiah does not refer to the Messiah, but to the slaughter of the northern tribes of Israel by the Assyrians. But there is a remez, a hint, a teaching that we can gather from here, that Drosh would be teaching, here of which Mattiyahu makes use of. The traditional burial place of Yaakov's wife Rachel is in Ramah, just outside Beit Lechem. One can visit what is called Rachel's tomb there today. Just as Rachel in her grave mourns for her posterity descended from her son Yosef, so the many women of nearby Beit Lechem mourn for their slain infants. It's really one and the same soul. So you can see how we can appropriately get to these different levels once we understand the Peshat. Speaking of Torah having 70 faces, it doesn't seem that anywhere in Torah or Tanakh there's this specific prophecy of he will be called a Nazareti, and so it's also not a quotation, it's just spoken by the prophets. So they must have had some kind of commentary, some kind of understanding in that day of what they gleaned from the scriptures. So this probably wouldn't have been the Peshat. And here is what it's saying here. It's Natsri of Nazareth. So what could it mean? Some suggesting he's taking the vow of a Nazarite. Instead of just being from Nazareth, it could be hinting at that. A second one, that since Nazareth was a place people made fun of it, because Nathaniel makes the remark, can anything good come from there? Then it's referring to him being despised. And so him being a resident like of a place despised. A third one, that he's going to be a Nelzer, which would be like a word play since the words are similar. He's a branch, he's a samak, a sprout. And a final possibility that there's it to be a Natsori in the future would mean to be one of his followers. And so we have this verse here, speaking of Saul, we found this man to be a pestilence, stirring up dissension among the Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. So it's possible that this sect already existed, and then Yehoshua is associated with it, and that this sect itself has a negative connotation to it. So from a very humble start nonetheless, but you can see how they kind of take a compilation of things, and this was completely appropriate of how he's connecting these things together. Here's a possibility of where someone is called a Nazarite, tying this back to Samson, who was supposed to be set apart from the womb for this purpose. So, I mean, there could be a connection here. The boy will be a Nazarite to God from the womb and will begin deliverance of Israel from the hand of the Philistines. This would tie in somebody who's like a physical deliverer. A final note on the wise men who are from the east who are bowing down before him. It does say of Esau, who is physically the older, so physically he would serve the younger, but also these sometimes swap, so it's kind of vague. Sometimes Jacob's leading, sometimes Esau. But a way this is understood is that Esau, Christianity, is going to serve the God of the Jews, that nations, because it said these are the Elohim that defeated the gods of Egypt. How the nations look to Israel is that they will need to worship. If you're very carnal, it's fine to have a kind of like a worse form of idolatry. But the closer you get to God, then there's not an excuse. You can't just say, well, it worked for this person, so it's fine for me. That for Israel, there should be nobody between them and God. And one example I'm going to give is that for King David, he saw that the Philistines did what was not lawful according to Torah and were blessed on account of it, where they put the ark of the Lord on a cart and had to be pulled that way. That was fine for the Philistines. But when David did that, then somebody died. So Israel should not start joining Christianity and say that they need to leave their ways. So if you're close to God, it's like you don't need to feel like you need to copy what's working for somebody else. You need to do, if you have knowledge and then you sin, that's worse. So however God is leading you of where you're at, then that is how you need to do. And I guess I'll throw out there that just because you bow down towards the temple does not mean you're worshiping the temple. We're worshiping the one who is in the temple. The only way that the nations can see God is through a physical representation. So for the time being, that's understandable. God winks at ignorance. But ultimately, you're not seeing Messiah correctly unless you see the Father. Anyway, thanks so much for joining. I hope you learned something, and I pray that you are blessed.